Hey heroes, and welcome to another intergalactic episode of History of the Marvel Universe. This channel is sponsored in part by Patreon supporters. If you would like to contribute and vote in monthly polls that help decide what topics get covered on the channel, then you can sign up for an amount of your choosing over at patreon.com/MaryMarvelite. The link is in the description below, along with other places you can find me. This week's tale begins in a section of space on the edge of the known universe, the Black Galaxy. Not a galaxy in a literal sense, this area was actually a living bioverse made up completely of organic matter. It was created millennia ago by the powerful space gods known as the Celestials, as part of a larger scheme to produce a new member of their own species. Natural star systems also formed there, one of which contained a pair of twin planets. It was there that intelligent life emerged in the Black Galaxy, becoming one of the universe's earliest scientifically advanced races. Untold eons ago, this system was visited by a cosmic entity known simply as the Stranger, who wished to embark on an ambitious experiment. This involved causing the star to begin going nova, which the nearby planet's inhabitants quickly noticed. Technologically advanced but lacking the capacity for interstellar travel, scientists Egros and Chimu sought a way for their people to survive the death of their sun. And thus was born Project World Core, a plan to hide in a protected bunker deep within the planet itself. Using technology designed by Egros, the entire population of 2 billion people was sent to the center of the planet and placed into suspended animation until it was safe to emerge and rebuild. However, because of the Stranger's experiment, the sun began to explode sooner than the scientists had calculated. Egros was still on the surface when it happened, and while he attempted to join the rest of his people in the core, it was too late. Utilizing the energy released, the Stranger merged every living thing in the core together with the planet itself, transforming the entire world into a single organism. Egros, meanwhile, had only made it about a third of the way to the center of the planet, but it was his consciousness that became dominant within this new being's mind. The Stranger also endowed this living planet with his own force of will, and thus it became known as Ego. However, it should be noted that the Stranger was not capable of accomplishing all of this with his own power alone. In the creation of Ego, he also utilized formulae and instruments provided by the Elder of the Universe, Tanelier Tavan, better known as the Collector. In exchange for this aid, the Stranger created not one but 2 living planets and turned the other one, dubbed Alter Ego, over to the Collector. And so while Alter Ego was added to Tavan's museum, Ego was allowed to freely roam the Black Galaxy. The Stranger, meanwhile, hoped to one day pit the 2 living planets against one another to determine whether it was freedom or captivity that bred a stronger will. Originally, Ego also had a living satellite named Id that was presumably also created by the Stranger. However, after living alone in Ego's shadow for thousands of years, Id eventually left to pursue his own desires. Meanwhile, the living planet, possessing Egros' memories, held the guilt of his people's fate until it drove him mad over 1,000,000 years. The first known people to encounter Ego were the Rigellians, a race that originally came from the Rigel star system, but had since spread out to establish colonies throughout the Milky Way and Andromeda galaxies. It was they who gave the Black Galaxy its name when a number of their exploratory vessels went missing in the area. That lasted for several millennia, during which time the Rigellians continued their aggressive expansion into other parts of space. One such colonizer was Tana Nile, who sought to seize control of Earth and add it to the technocratic Rigellian Empire. She was opposed by the thunder god Thor, who was subdued and abducted by the Rigellian inspection team. Despite this conflict, Thor ultimately listened when the Rigellian Grand Commissioner explained that a greater threat lurked within the Black Galaxy. Joined by a robotic Rigellian recorder, the Thunder God traveled to the heart of the Black Galaxy and came face to face with Ego, the living planet. Wishing to test himself, Ego created hordes of humanoid minions from his own flesh, which he dubbed his antibodies. Ego intended on using these to spread out to other worlds, but Thor was able to summon a storm powerful enough to stun the living planet. Humiliated by this, Ego abandoned his plans for conquest and sealed off the Bioverse, isolating himself once again. In exchange for this aid, the Rigellians denied Tananiel's claim over the Earth, freeing the planet from Rigellian colonization. Several months after that, the Bioverse was invaded by the World Eater Galactus, who sought to consume the living planet. His proximity to Rigel also threatened the Rigellians, and so they once again summoned Thor to their aid. This situation resulted in an unlikely alliance as Thor and the Rigellian Recorder fought alongside Ego. They were further helped by a group called the Wanderers, the descendants of survivors from the very first planet that Galactus ever consumed. You can refer to my video on Galactus himself for more details on those events. Working together, Thor and his allies succeeded in repelling the World Eater, saving both Ego and the Rigellians. In gratitude, Ego allowed the Wanderers to settle on his surface and created an environment suitable for their race. Meanwhile, although the Rigellians did intend to honor their vow never to colonize the Earth, they still desired a similar planet for their empire. As part of a plan to terraform other worlds, Tananiel was sent to the Black Galaxy to extract a sample from the living planet. She brought this piece of Ego to the primitive planet Black World and used it to experiment with technology that would allow them to alter the temperature of entire planets. After channeling a certain energy through the sample, she also found that the ape-like inhabitants of Black World rapidly evolved to resemble modern humans. However, this process also affected the sample itself, causing it to develop sentience and take on a humanoid shape. Possessing some of Ego's power, this new entity became known as Ego Prime. Going against Tananiel's wishes, it continued to bathe the planet's inhabitants in a radiation that caused them to rapidly advance, effectively moving their civilization forward in time until it resembled Earth in the 20th century. Despite this, Ego Prime itself was a violent, rampaging creature that attacked on sight. In the end, however, it seems that the Black Worlders destroyed themselves when their rapid, unchecked advancement led to nuclear war. Joining forces with Asgardians, Sif and Hildegard, as well as the Black World native Silas Grant, Tananiel escaped this destruction and fled to Earth, but was pursued by Ego Prime. Once there, Ego Prime evolved again, this time resembling an enormous human whose visage was reminiscent of the original Ego. Gaining intelligence and the ability to speak, he sought to evolve and overpopulate all life on Earth until there was enough organic material to transform the entire planet into another living world, eventually integrating the entire solar system into the Bioverse. Ego Prime's schemes were opposed by Thor and his Asgardian allies, but in the end it was the Allfather, Odin, who defeated the menace by channeling its energy for his own purposes. A weakened Ego Prime disappeared but was subsequently captured by the Stranger and held prisoner in his laboratory world. The truth of the matter, however, is that Odin had been manipulating things from behind the scenes since before Tananiel was even sent to the Black Galaxy. Thus, it was Odin himself who was ultimately responsible for the creation of Ego Prime in the first place. This was itself part of a larger scheme to use Ego's energy to transform 3 humans into young gods. Said humans included Jason Kimball, a fashion designer in Brooklyn whose gambling debts had landed him in trouble with the mob. Chi Lo, an Asian woman who attended university in Japan but found a simpler life fishing to be more fulfilling. And Carter Diem, an Israeli soldier who had grown disillusioned with constant fighting and death. Thus, these three were transformed into young gods, with Chi-Lo becoming Harvest, Carter becoming Bright Sword, and Jason becoming Genii. They subsequently joined 9 other young gods that had been assembled and empowered by the Earth's various goddesses, including the elder god Gaia. That was all part of an even larger plan to spare the Earth from the judgment of the Celestials, but that's something I already touched on in my video about the history of the Eternals. But back to the story at hand, Odin's schemes would prove to have other consequences. By manipulating the Rigellians into removing a chunk of Ego, he upset the living planet's ecological balance, driving Ego mad once again. The living planet quickly devoured the Wanderers who had settled on its surface, their individual identities disappearing as their bodies were subsumed into his mass. Meanwhile, Galactus grew hungry and decided to attempt once again to consume Ego. This time, Ego fought alone, but proved that he was a force to be reckoned with. Galactus launched a volley of fiery comets into the living planet, but Ego transformed his outer surface to a frozen layer capable of absorbing them before redirecting the energy right back at his attacker. In the end, Galactus realized not only that they were too evenly matched for either one to defeat the other, but also that in his maddened state, Ego could become a threat to the universe at large. Thus, Galactus traveled to Earth and recruited both Thor and his ally Hercules to help stop the living planet. The two gods joined Galactus' herald, Firelord, in an assault on Ego's surface and battled entities made from his planetary flesh. They also found what appeared to be Ego's brain, and Thor witnessed Egros's memories, allowing him to learn part of the living planet's origin. I will note that the brain they encountered was actually a decoy created by Ego, and that his real brain was much larger and much deeper inside the living planet. In any event, while Thor, Hercules, and Firelord were distracting Ego, Galactus was building a massive interstellar thruster which he affixed to the planet's southern pole. After retrieving the heroes, he then banished Ego into the endless darkness between galaxies. Removed from his natural habitat and deprived of starlight, Ego began to decay, but then he succeeded in psionically seizing control of the thruster, and with it the ability to chart his own course. He sought to get revenge on Galactus, but as he searched for him, Ego was attacked by the mad Titan Thanos. Easily withstanding the initial assault, Ego's counterattack wiped out Thanos' fleet, and the survivors were seized and consumed by his indescribably enormous maw. Thanos, of course, survived and attempted to use the Galactus engine to destroy Ego from within. Fearing that he might actually succeed, Ego ejected Thanos and his Black Order, shooting them off into space. With that nuisance dealt with, Ego returned to his chosen task, his search for the World Eater soon leading him to Earth. While Galactus was no longer there, Ego's very presence caused widespread upheaval across the entire planet. Every major city on Earth was virtually destroyed, but fortunately this damage was undone by a reality-altering superhuman named Skip Collins. I will note that Collins, while powerful, was never consciously aware of his abilities, having unknowingly gained them decades earlier when he was exposed to radiation during a nuclear test. Furthermore, he completely exhausted this power when he undid the damage done to Earth by Ego's gravity. While he did that, the Fantastic Four launched into space to confront Ego and prevent further damage. During the trip, the FF also found the decoy brain and determined that it was a fake, leading to the belief that the Egros memories were fabricated. However, it's since been confirmed that Egros did exist and indeed remains a part of Ego. While the Fantastic Four failed to destroy Ego's true brain, they did damage the Galactus engine, causing only one of the two thrusters to fire when Ego attempted to crash into the Earth. As a result, Ego's trajectory arced away from the Earth and sent him careening towards the Sun. Caught by the gravitational pull of a much larger object, Ego's body was pulled apart while his flesh was seared by the heat of the sun. However, this was still not enough to actually kill him, and the solar energy actually triggered a unique form of photosynthesis within Ego, allowing him to pull his mass back together. Repairing and regaining control of the Galactus engine, he set out into deep space once again, but found himself drained from the ordeal. Hoping to lure in life forms he could consume, Ego transformed his surface into a lush, inhabitable paradise. The first to find him like this were members of the ruthless shape-shifting race called the Dire Wraiths, who began building a base there. This in turn caught the attention of two space knights of Galador, Seeker and Scanner, whose people had been at war with the Dire Wraiths for nearly 2 centuries. They attempted to intervene, but this battle ended with both sides being drawn into the living planet. Fortunately, the two space knights were ultimately rescued by their comrade, Ram. Ego subsequently allied himself with the Elders of the Universe, a group of ancient immortals, each of whom was the last surviving member of their individual race. Due to his similar circumstances and origins, Ego was accepted into their ranks and served as a base of operations for them. He attacked the Silver Surfer on their behalf and attempted to consume his energies, but the Surfer was able to seize control of Ego's engine and threatened to steer him into a star if he didn't release him. Sometime after that, Ego came upon a spacefaring race called the Corbinites, whose home planet had been destroyed by the fire demon Surtur. He sought to consume them, but the Corbinites were defended by their champion, Beta Ray Bill, who possessed powers similar to that of Thor due to his own Asgardian weapon, Stormbreaker. After Bill unleashed a magnetic vortex that delivered a painful blow to Ego, the living planet apologized for his actions and explained that the Galactus engine required significant energy to control, driving him to ravenous hunger. In response, Bill offered to have his people destroy the thruster once and for all, and Ego agreed. No longer in danger of careening into the black space between galaxies, Ego offered to become a new home for the wandering Corbinites. However, Bill was no fool and declined, knowing that the Corbinites would not forgive the deaths that the living planet had already caused. Ego's calm and friendly demeanor quickly evaporated as he renewed his assault on the Corbinites, and with the engine no longer diverting his attention, the scale of his attacks increased tenfold. Beta Ray Bill ultimately ended this battle by redirecting a massive comet to collide with Ego, forcing his surrender. As the Corbinite fleet departed to continue their journey through the stars, the living planet was left alone once again. Meanwhile, back in the Black Galaxy, the Celestials' plan to spawn a new member of their ancient race neared completion. To accomplish this feat, they also harvested genetic material from the likes of Hercules, the High Evolutionary, and Eric Masterson, all of whom we've actually talked about on the channel before. An alien woman named Stellaris, whose home planet had been destroyed by the Celestials, attempted to intervene with a suicidal attack that sparked a massive explosion. However, the energy released was absorbed by the new Celestial along with the rest of the Black Galaxy's bioverse, completing its birth. The Black Galaxy Celestial subsequently sought out Ego, ostensibly to pass judgment on the living planet, much like other Celestials had done elsewhere. However, the two were attacked by an even larger entity, a living bioverse dubbed Super Ego. Now, I will note that while the Black Galaxy was also described as a bioverse, Super Ego was significantly smaller than that, measuring under 50,000 miles on its widest axis. While enormous enough to dwarf Ego, this is still smaller than some larger planets. I will also note that the origins of Super Ego are unknown, but it seems reasonable to presume a connection to the Black Galaxy, and I would personally posit that perhaps it emerged from there before the rest of the bioverse was absorbed by the new Celestial. Also, the High Evolutionary witnessed this being as it attacked Ego and speculated that there was actually more than one living planet, each of whom had spawned from Super Ego, but this theory has thus far gone unsupported. In any event, Super Ego enveloped and seemingly destroyed Ego as it attempted to absorb him into its biomass. However, the remaining Celestials then arrived to launch an attack on the Bioverse. While the details of what happened next are undocumented due to a lack of witnesses as the High Evolutionary's allies pulled him away from the scene to continue another quest, Super Ego has not been seen since, and so one might presume that the Celestials either destroyed it or used it in another of their cosmic experiments. Perhaps because of this, Ego survived yet again and was ultimately separated from the rest of Super Ego's biomass. He did not accomplish this alone, however, as the Supreme Intelligence, the ruler of the interstellar Kree Empire, used his own mental powers to save Ego. Of course, this was just so the Supreme Intelligence could use the living planet in his own schemes to re-establish dominance in the wake of the Kree-Shi'ar War. Usurping control of him, the Supreme Intelligence sent Ego to attack other worlds, making it seem as though he was trying to use his own energy to awaken them and transform them into more living planets. Of course, none of them actually came to life, and the attacked planets like Krylor were simply destroyed. This trail of devastation heightened tensions among the universe's various spacefaring races, who had already called together an intergalactic council to discuss the danger that humanity posed to the cosmos. Possessing the ability to travel through warp space under his own power, Ego attacked the council planet, Salandiar, but was opposed by the Silver Surfer, Professor Xavier, and a group of mutant Skrulls called Cadre K. But before the living planet could be subdued and questioned, agents of the Supreme Intelligence seemingly killed him and towed him away. In the wake of that incident, with tensions still running high, it was decided that the Sol system would be quarantined and that the Earth would be declared a penal colony for the universe's worst offenders. Meanwhile, the Supreme Intelligence shrank Ego to the size of a human infant and had him sent to Earth. Ego was found by an elderly couple in a little town, Nebraska, who believed that they'd come upon some sort of space baby and brought him back to their farmhouse. Not long after, however, Ego began expanding, threatening to envelop and consume the Earth. At the same time, the energy generated by the process was being drained and collected by the Supreme Intelligence, who intended on using it to re-establish the Kree Empire and keep the reborn Ego as a slave. Before he spread too far, his presence was discovered by the Silver Surfer and the Heroes of Earth, who worked to halt his expansion. In the end, Ego's mass was excised from the Earth and channeled through the cosmic hero Quasar into an infinitely vast realm of potential energy called the Quantum Zone. Meanwhile, the Supreme Intelligence's schemes were exposed and plans to turn Earth into an intergalactic penal colony were repealed. Ego was later released from the Quantum Zone and became a host for the Xandarian World Mind, which transformed him into a mobile base for the Nova Corps, but we're out of time for this week's video, so for that story you can check out the 2007 Nova series, starting with issue 20 if you want to skip right to the Ego appearances. Because that is all I have for you this week, and thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and share it on your favorite social media. As always, the issues referenced in this video are listed in the description below if you would like to read them for yourself, as well as links to other places you can find me. Let me give a special shout out to all of my Patreon and Ko-fi supporters, Twitch subscribers, and YouTube members who help make the channel possible. By signing up for any ongoing amount on any of these platforms, you'll get your name in these special thanks here, but Patreon is the one that helps determine what topics get covered on the channel via monthly polls. That being said, if there's anything in particular that you want me to talk about, be sure to let me know in the comments. But that is indeed all I have for you this week, and so until next time, true believers, Excelsior!